The blizzard had come down from the Sierra Nevada mountains like the wrath of God himself, burying Placerville, California in 3 feet of snow within 12 hours. And Owen Hartford knew that riding out in it was suicide. But the instinct that had kept him alive through 5 years of cowboy work told him something was wrong beyond those white hills. The year was 1871, and winter in the California mountains could be as deadly as any gunfight, turning the gold rush town into an isolated fortress of ice and wind. Owen pulled his collar up against the cutting cold, his bay gelding protesting with every step through the drifts that rose past its knees. He had been checking the northern fence line of the Copper Ridge Ranch when he spotted it, a patch of dark fabric barely visible against the endless white, fluttering like a flag of surrender in the screaming wind. His heart hammered as he urged his horse forward, dismounting before the animal had fully stopped. Owen dropped to his knees and began digging with his bare hands, his gloves discarded because he needed to feel, needed to know if he was pulling a living soul from this frozen grave or just recovering a body for burial. The fabric belonged to a coat, and beneath it was a woman, her lips blue, her skin pale as the snow that had tried to claim her. Owen scooped her into his arms, and her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with cold. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, cracked and broken. "Why save me?" Owen looked down at her, this stranger who weighed almost nothing in his arms, and felt something shift in his chest. "Because you matter," he said, and he meant it with a fierceness that surprised him. He wrapped her in his coat and lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her to keep her upright against his chest. The ride back to the ranch house took 40 minutes that felt like hours, with Owen talking to her the whole time, demanding she stay awake, telling her about the fire he would build, the hot coffee he would brew, anything to keep her conscious. The ranch house was small but solid, built by Owen's own hands over the past 2 years. He kicked the door open and carried her straight to the fireplace, laying her on the bearskin rug while he worked with frantic efficiency to build up the fire. Once flames were crackling and throwing heat into the room, he turned his attention back to her. Her clothes were soaked through, ice crystals clinging to the wool of her dress. Owen knew enough about freezing to understand that leaving her in wet clothes would kill her, as surely as leaving her in the snow. He worked carefully, respectfully, removing her outer layers and wrapping her in every dry blanket he owned. Her feet were the worst, the toes an alarming shade of white, and he filled a basin with cool water, not hot, knowing that warming her too quickly could cause more damage. As he worked, he studied her face. She was young, probably close to his own 24 years, with dark hair that fell in wet tangles around her shoulders. Even half frozen and unconscious, there was something striking about her, a delicate strength in the set of her jaw. Her eyes opened again as he was tending to her feet, and this time there was more awareness in them, along with something that looked like fear. "Easy," Owen said softly. "You are safe. I am Owen Hartford. This is my ranch house. You were buried in the snow about 3 miles north of here." She stared at him for a long moment, and he saw her taking in the room, the situation, calculating whether she was truly safe or had traded one danger for another. Finally, she spoke, her voice still rough but stronger than before. "Penelope," she said. "Penelope Zimmerman." "Well, Miss Zimmerman, you picked a hell of a day for a walk." He tried for lightness, wanting to ease the fear he still saw in her eyes. "I was not walking." She closed her eyes, and her face tightened with what looked like pain, though Owen could not tell if it was physical or something else. "I was running." Owen's hand stilled on the bandage he was wrapping around her foot. Running, in a blizzard. That spoke of desperation, of fear greater than the fear of freezing to death. He wanted to ask what she was running from, but the exhaustion was winning its battle against her consciousness, and he decided questions could wait. "You are safe here," he repeated. "Get some rest. We will talk when you are stronger." She nodded slightly, and her eyes drifted closed. Owen sat back on his heels and watched her breathe, watched the color slowly returning to her cheeks as the fire did its work. Outside, the blizzard continued its assault on the world, but inside, the silence was broken only by the crackle of flames and the soft sound of Penelope's breathing. He made coffee and sat in his chair by the fire, keeping watch over her through the night. Sleep was impossible anyway, his mind turning over the mystery of this woman. Placerville was not so large that strangers went unnoticed, but he had never seen her before. The town had grown around gold mining, though the easy gold was long gone by now, and it attracted all sorts of people, prospectors and merchants, gamblers and farmers trying to make a new start. As dawn broke gray and cold, the blizzard finally began to ease. Penelope stirred, and Owen moved to her side, helping her sit up. She winced as she moved, and he saw bruises on her wrists that he had not noticed the night before, dark marks that looked like fingerprints. "I have stew," he offered, "and fresh bread from yesterday. You need to eat." She nodded, and he brought her a bowl, watching as she ate slowly, carefully, like someone who had not eaten well in some time. When she was done, she looked at him directly, and he saw determination in her eyes that had not been there the night before. "I need to tell you something," she said. "You deserve to know what you have gotten yourself into by helping me." Owen settled into his chair. "I am listening." Penelope drew a breath. "I was engaged to be married, to Marcus Thorpe. He owns the big house on the hill, the one with the white columns. He made his money in silver mining down in Nevada and moved here last year. Everyone in town thinks he is a pillar of the community, generous and respectable." She paused, and Owen saw her hands tighten on the blanket. "But behind closed doors, he is cruel. He drinks, and when he drinks, he gets angry. The bruises on my wrists are from 3 nights ago when I said I wanted to postpone the wedding. He said I belonged to him, that I had no right to change my mind." Owen felt cold anger settling in his gut, but he kept his voice calm. "So you ran." "I waited until yesterday afternoon. There was a moment when he went into town for a business meeting. I knew the storm was coming. Everyone was talking about it, but I thought I could make it to Sacramento before it hit. I have a cousin there who would take me in. But the snow came faster than anyone expected, and I got turned around in the white, and then my horse threw me and ran off, and I just kept walking because stopping meant dying." She met his eyes. "But maybe dying would have been easier than going back to him." "You are not going back to him," Owen said, and the certainty in his voice surprised even himself. "You are safe here for as long as you need." "You do not understand," Penelope said urgently. "Marcus will look for me. When the storm clears, he will search, and he has men who work for him, men who will do whatever he pays them to do. If he finds me here, he will make trouble for you. Serious trouble." Owen leaned forward. "Miss Zimmerman, I have been making my own way since I was 16 years old. I have driven cattle from Texas to Montana, survived stampedes and droughts and men who would kill you for the boots on your feet. I'm not afraid of Marcus Thorpe or his hired men. You are staying here until you are well, and then we will figure out the next step together." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. "Why would you risk so much for a stranger?" Owen thought about his answer, about the truth of it. "Because I meant what I said out there in the snow. You matter. Every person matters, and no one deserves to live in fear, especially not in their own home, with the person who is supposed to love them." The tears spilled over then, and Penelope covered her face with her hands. Owen gave her privacy, moving to the window to look out at the transformed landscape. The world was buried in white, pristine and deadly beautiful. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline silence. Over the next 3 days, Penelope healed under Owen's careful attention. The color returned fully to her face, and the dangerous whiteness left her toes. She was lucky. Owen told her she would keep all her fingers and toes, though she would need to be careful of the cold for a while. They fell into an easy routine, with Owen handling the outdoor work, checking on the horses and cattle, while Penelope insisted on helping inside, cooking meals that were far better than anything Owen had managed on his own. They talked as they worked, sharing pieces of their stories. Owen told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 15, about heading west because there was nothing left for him back east. He talked about his dream of building this ranch into something real, something lasting. Penelope told him about coming to California with her father 5 years ago, when she was 18 and full of hope. Her father had bought a small store in Placerville, and they had made a good life until he died of pneumonia 2 winters ago. Without family and with limited options for a woman alone, she had accepted Marcus Thorpe's courtship, mistaking his attention for genuine affection. By the time she realized her error, she was engaged, and Marcus made it clear that breaking the engagement was not an option he would tolerate. "I thought I was being practical," she said one evening as they sat by the fire after dinner. "I thought security was more important than love, that I could learn to be content. But contentment and fear are not the same thing, and I was so afraid, all the time." "You do not have to be afraid anymore," Owen said quietly. Penelope looked at him, and something passed between them, a connection that had been building over the past days. Owen had found himself watching her when she was not looking, noticing the way she hummed while she cooked, the quick intelligence in her eyes when they discussed books, the fact that both of them had read, trading favorites. "I cannot stay here forever," Penelope said, though she sounded reluctant. "Marcus will come eventually." "Then let him come," Owen replied. "But you are not going anywhere until you are ready, and only to a place you choose." On the 4th day, the choice was taken from them. Owen was in the barn, tending to his horses, when he heard the sound of riders approaching. He walked out to see 3 men on horseback, with Marcus Thorpe in the lead. Thorpe was exactly what Owen had expected. A man in his late 30s with slicked back hair and expensive clothes, sitting his horse like someone who had learned to ride as an adult rather than growing up in the saddle. His face was flushed with cold and anger. "Hartford," Thorpe called out, "I hear you have something that belongs to me." Owen stopped a few yards from the men, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. "I do not traffic in belongings, Thorpe. If you are talking about Miss Zimmerman, she is a free woman making her own choices. She is my fiancé, and she is confused. The cold must have affected her thinking. I have come to take her home where she belongs." "She is not confused," Owen said evenly. "And this is her home now for as long as she wants it to be." Thorpe's face darkened. "You have no right to keep her from me. We are engaged to be married. The church knows it, the whole town knows it." "An engagement is not a shackle," Owen said. "She broke it off. That is her right." One of Thorpe's men, a thin man with a scar across his cheek, moved his hand toward his gun. Owen's eyes tracked the movement, and his voice went cold. "I would think very carefully before you do what you are thinking of doing." The door to the house opened, and Penelope stepped out onto the porch. She had bundled up in one of Owen's extra coats, but even wrapped in clothes too large for her, she held herself with dignity. "Marcus," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard, "I am not going back. The engagement is over. I am sorry if that hurts your pride, but my mind is made up." Thorpe's horse pranced sideways, responding to his rider's tension. Penelope, be reasonable. You cannot stay here, living in sin with a cowboy you barely know. Your reputation will be destroyed. Come home, and we will forget this happened. My reputation is my own concern, Penelope said. And I would rather have no reputation at all than live one more day in fear of you. The words hung in the cold air. Thorpe's face went from red to white, and Owen saw his hand clench on the reins. You will regret this, Thorpe said, his voice shaking with rage. Both of you. I have influence in this town, Hartford. I can make things very difficult for you. Then I guess we will see how difficult things can get, Owen replied calmly. Now get off my land. For a moment, Owen thought it might come to gunfire. The two men behind Thorpe were clearly hired guns, and they were watching Owen with the calculating eyes of men who killed for money. But Thorpe was not stupid enough to start a shooting war in broad daylight, not when it would destroy the respectable image he had worked to build. This is not over, Thorpe spat, and he wheeled his horse around, his men following. They rode off at a gallop, throwing up clouds of snow. Owen stood watching until they disappeared from sight, then turned to Penelope. She had come down from the porch and was standing close to him, her face pale but resolute. I have brought trouble to your door, she said. I am sorry. You brought nothing but yourself, Owen replied. And I am not sorry about that at all. Their eyes met, and Owen felt that pull again, stronger now. Without thinking about it, he reached out and took her hand. She did not pull away. They stood there in the snow-covered yard, hands linked, and Owen knew with absolute certainty that something had changed, that this was not just about offering shelter to someone in need. This was about Penelope specifically, about the way she made him laugh, the way she challenged his opinions on everything from politics to the best way to make coffee, the way she fit into his life like she had always been meant to be there. We should go inside, Penelope said softly. It is cold. But neither of them moved, not for several long seconds. Finally, Owen squeezed her hand gently and released it, and they walked back to the house together. That night after dinner, they sat by the fire, and the conversation turned personal in a way it had not before. What made you become a cowboy? Penelope asked. You are educated, you could have done other things. Owen considered the question. I like the freedom of it, I suppose. The honesty. A horse does not care about your family name or your bank account. Cattle do not judge you by anything except your ability to do the work. And there is something about this land, the way it is so big and wild, that makes me feel like I am part of something larger than myself. He paused. What about you? What did you want to be before circumstances took the choice away? Penelope smiled a little sadly. I wanted to be a teacher. I love learning, love books, and I thought it would be wonderful to share that with children. But women teachers are supposed to be unmarried, and once my father died, I needed to think about survival more than dreams. Why can you not be a teacher now? Owen asked. Placerville has a schoolhouse. I do not know if they have a teacher at the moment. Marcus would never allow it, Penelope said automatically, then stopped. I mean, he would have never allowed it. I keep forgetting that I do not have to think about what he would or would not allow anymore. You do not, Owen confirmed. You can do whatever you want, Penelope. You are free. She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. Am I, or have I just traded one cage for another? I have no money, no home of my own, no way to support myself. I am dependent on your charity. It is not charity, Owen said firmly. And if you want independence, we will find a way to give you that. You can stay here, help with the ranch, and I will pay you a fair wage. Or we can inquire about the teaching position, or anything else you want to do. But you are not trapped here, Penelope. You are welcome, and there is a difference. Tears glistened in her eyes again. You are a good man, Owen Hartford, better than I knew existed. I am just a man, Owen said quietly, but I am trying to do the right thing. The following week brought new challenges. Word had spread through Placerville about Penelope staying at Owen's ranch, and opinion was divided. Some people, particularly the women who had seen Marcus Thorpe's true nature beneath his polished exterior, quietly supported her choice. But others, influenced by Thorpe's money and position, saw it as a scandal, an improper arrangement that violated decent society's rules. Owen rode into town for supplies and found himself on the receiving end of cold stares and pointed whispers. At the general store, the owner, a normally friendly man named Robert Sterling, was curt and refused to extend Owen credit as he usually did. "I run a respectable business," Sterling said stiffly. "I cannot be associated with that kind of carrying on." Owen counted out cash instead, keeping his temper in check. "There is no carrying on, Sterling. I helped someone who was dying in the snow, that is all." "That is not what I hear," Sterling replied, wrapping the supplies with sharp, angry movements. "I hear she is living under your roof. No chaperone, no propriety. Marcus Thorpe is a respected man, and you stole his fiancé." "She is not property to be stolen," Owen said coldly, "and maybe you should ask yourself why a woman would rather risk death in a blizzard than marry a respected man." He gathered his supplies and left, frustration burning in his chest. The ride back to the ranch gave him time to cool down, but he knew this was going to be a problem. Small towns ran on reputation and gossip, and right now, the gossip was working against them. Penelope was in the kitchen when he returned, and she took one look at his face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" Owen set down the supplies and told her about the reception in town. Penelope listened, her face growing troubled. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said. "Your life is being destroyed because of me." "My life is not being destroyed," Owen countered. "Some small-minded people are being unpleasant. There is a difference. Owen, you need your reputation to run a ranch. You need to be able to do business in town to get credit to hire help when you need it. If the town turns against you, then they turn against me," Owen interrupted. "I will not throw you out to protect my reputation, Penelope. That is not who I am." She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw a decision forming behind her eyes. "Then we need to give them what they want. We need to make this arrangement respectable." Owen's heart began to beat faster. "What are you suggesting?" "We should get married," Penelope said, her voice steady despite the color rising in her cheeks. "A marriage of convenience to protect both our reputations. It would solve everything. You would not be harboring another man's fiancé, and I would have legal protection from Marcus. We do not have to, it does not have to be a real marriage in every sense, but on paper, for the town's sake." Owen stood very still, weighing her words. Part of him wanted to reject the idea immediately, because marriage should be about love, not convenience. But another part, a larger part if he was honest with himself, wanted to say yes for reasons that had nothing to do with reputation and everything to do with the way his heart sped up when Penelope smiled at him. "Is that what you want?" he asked carefully. "A marriage of convenience?" Penelope met his eyes, and he saw uncertainty there and something else. "I want to be free of Marcus. I want to stay here with you. If marriage is the way to accomplish that, then yes, that is what I want. Is it what you want?" Owen thought about lying, about pretending he was just being practical. But Penelope had been lied to enough, lived with pretense enough. She deserved honesty. "I want you to stay," he said slowly, "and not just to protect you or to do the proper thing. I want you to stay because I have come to care about you, Penelope. These past weeks, having you here, it has felt right in a way nothing else in my life has felt right. So if you are offering marriage, even a marriage of convenience, my answer is yes. But you should know that my feelings are not entirely convenient. Penelope's breath caught, and color flooded her cheeks. Owen, you do not have to feel the same way, he said quickly. I am not asking that of you. If you need time, if you only want the legal protection, I understand. I just needed you to know the truth of where I stand. Penelope crossed the space between them, and before Owen could guess her intention, she had taken his hands in hers. I need you to understand something, she said, her voice shaking slightly. When I was in that snow, when I was dying, my only thought was that I was relieved it would be over. I was not sad to be leaving the world because there was nothing in it I wanted to stay for. And then you pulled me out and you said those words, because you matter, and something inside me woke up. These weeks here with you, I have remembered what it feels like to be happy, to laugh, to feel safe, to feel like maybe I matter after all. She paused, gathering courage. So when I suggested marriage, I was not thinking entirely about convenience either. Owen felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. Penelope, I am not saying I am ready for everything that marriage means, she continued. Marcus, he damaged something in me, made me afraid of what I thought I wanted. But I am saying that I can imagine, maybe, healing from that, with you, if you are patient. Owen lifted one of her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. I have all the patience in the world. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who passed through Placerville once a month. It was a small ceremony, attended only by a few of Owen's friends from other ranches, and a handful of townspeople who had the courage to defy Marcus Thorpe's displeasure. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that she had sewn herself from fabric Owen bought in town, and Owen wore his best shirt and the new vest Penelope had surprised him with the night before. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her carefully, chastely, aware of the healing she still needed. But even that brief kiss sent electricity through him, a promise of more to come when she was ready. Marcus Thorpe did not attend, but his presence hung over the celebration like a storm cloud. Owen knew this was not over, that Thorpe was not the kind of man to accept defeat gracefully. But for the moment, surrounded by friends and standing beside Penelope, now Penelope Hartford, Owen allowed himself to feel hopeful about the future. The winter passed slowly, as winters in the mountains do. Owen and Penelope settled into married life with a care and gentleness that allowed both of them to adjust to this new reality. They had moved Penelope's things into the bedroom, but Owen insisted on sleeping in the main room by the fire, giving her space and privacy until she decided otherwise. But gradually, the walls between them came down. Penelope began to reach for his hand when they sat by the fire in the evenings. Owen would find excuses to touch her shoulder as he passed, or to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. One night in late February, after a particularly fierce argument about whether Shakespeare or Milton was the superior poet, Penelope dissolved into laughter, and Owen found himself laughing with her. And suddenly, they were kissing, really kissing, with a heat and hunger that left them both breathless. "Owen," Penelope whispered against his mouth, "I am ready. I think I am ready. If you are patient with me always," Owen promised, and he carried her to the bedroom, taking his time, letting her set the pace, making sure that every moment was her choice, her desire. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes, and afterward, Penelope curled against his chest and whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," Owen replied, stroking her hair. "I think I have from the moment I pulled you out of that snow." The next morning brought reality crashing back. Owen woke to the sound of shouting and looked out the window to see smoke rising from the direction of his northern pasture. He dressed quickly and rode out to find one of his fences destroyed and 20 head of cattle missing. The tracks in the melting snow told the story clearly enough. This was not wolves or natural disaster. This was deliberate theft, and Owen knew without having to ask who was behind it. He reported the theft to the sheriff, a man named Tom Brennan who was sympathetic but realistic about the situation. "I believe you about Thorpe being behind this," Brennan said. "But believing and proving are two different things. He has alibis, witnesses who will swear he was in town all night. His hired men are ghosts as far as the law is concerned. I am sorry, Owen, but unless you catch them in the act, there is not much I can do." Owen rode home frustrated and angry, but he kept his temper in check around Penelope. She saw through him anyway. It was Marcus, was it not? 20 head of cattle gone, fence torn down, no proof, no witnesses. Owen slammed his fist on the table, then immediately regretted it when he saw Penelope flinch. "I am sorry, I am not angry at you." "I know," Penelope said quietly, "but I am the reason this is happening." "No," Owen said firmly. "Marcus Thorpe is the reason this is happening. He is a criminal and a bully, and I will not let him drive us apart or drive us off this land." But Thorpe's campaign of harassment continued. Fences were cut, equipment went missing, and one of Owen's horses turned up lame with clear signs of tampering. Each time, Owen reported it, and each time there was no proof, no way to tie it back to Thorpe legally. The strain began to show. Owen found himself short-tempered, jumping at shadows, sleeping poorly. Penelope tried to help, tried to be strong, but Owen could see the guilt eating at her, the feeling that she had brought this destruction into his life. Things came to a head in early spring. Owen was working on repairing yet another damaged fence when he heard a horse approaching at speed. He turned to see Penelope riding toward him, her face white with fear. "Owen, the house. There are men at the house." Owen dropped his tools and swung onto his horse, riding hard back toward the ranch. As they crested the hill, he saw 3 men on the porch, and one of them was holding a torch. Owen drew his revolver as he rode into the yard, pulling his horse to a sliding stop. "Step away from my house." The men turned. They were Thorpe's hired guns, the same ones who had ridden out with him that first day. The one with the scar across his cheek grinned. "We got a message from Mr. Thorpe. He thinks you and your woman need to move on, find someplace else to play house. And if we do not..." Owen kept his gun trained on them, very aware that he was outnumbered and that Penelope was an exposed target behind him. "Then accidents happen," Scarface said, gesturing with the torch. "Houses burn down. Shame when people are trapped inside." Owen felt cold rage settling over him, the kind that made his hands steady and his mind clear. "Put down the torch and leave, and I will not kill you where you stand." "You are 1 man against 3, another of the hired guns said, his hand hovering over his own weapon. "You going to kill all of us before one of us drops you?" "I will die trying," Owen said evenly. "And I promise you, the first bullet I fire is going straight through your friend's head, so ask yourself if Marcus Thorpe is paying you enough to die for him." The moment stretched out, tense as a drawn wire. Then Penelope spoke from behind Owen, her voice clear and strong. "Or you could tell Marcus that I will meet with him. Alone. 1 conversation and then he leaves Owen in peace." "No," Owen said immediately. "Absolutely not." "Owen, I cannot watch him destroy you," Penelope said. "I cannot watch him burn down everything you have built. 1 conversation. I will make him understand that this is over, that I am never coming back, and then he can move on with his life." "He will hurt you," Owen said, still not taking his eyes off the hired guns. "Or worse. Then you will come with me, You can wait outside, but we need to end this, Owen. We cannot live like this, always waiting for the next attack. Owen wanted to refuse, wanted to tell her that they would find another way. But she was right. This could not continue. Either they faced Thorpe directly, or they would spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. "Fine," he said, "but I am not waiting outside. I am coming into any meeting with you, and if he lays one hand on you, I will not be responsible for what happens." Scarface lowered the torch, a satisfied smirk on his face. "Tomorrow, noon, the big house. Come alone or the deal is off." They rode away, and Owen finally holstered his gun. His hands were shaking with delayed reaction, and when Penelope came to him, he pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly she gasped. "We do not have to do this," he said into her hair. "We can leave, start over somewhere else." "No," Penelope said. "You built this place with your own hands. You have a life here, a future. I will not let him take that away. We face him together, and we end this." The next day dawned clear and cold, spring still more promise than reality in the mountains. Owen and Penelope dressed carefully, both of them aware that this meeting could go badly in a dozen different ways. Owen wore his gun openly, and he made sure Penelope saw him check the loads. "If things go wrong," he told her, "you run. You get out of that house and you run, and you do not stop until you reach the sheriff." "If things go wrong, we run together," Penelope countered. "I am not leaving you, Owen, not for anything." They rode into town together, their horses side by side. The streets were busy with the midday activity, and Owen felt the weight of watching eyes as they passed. Everyone knew where they were going and why. Marcus Thorpe's house sat on the hill overlooking Placerville, a monument to his wealth and pretensions. It was far too grand for a town like this, with its white columns and manicured lawns, looking like it had been transplanted from a southern plantation. They tied their horses at the front gate and walked up the path together. The door opened before they reached it, and Marcus Thorpe stood framed in the doorway, dressed impeccably as always. "Penelope," he said, his voice oily with false warmth, "I am so glad you have come to your senses. Please come in." "You too, Hartford, though I had rather hoped Penelope would have the courage to come alone." "Where I go, my husband goes," Penelope said coldly. "We are here to talk, Marcus, to end this feud that you started." Thorpe's face tightened at the word husband, but he stepped aside to let them enter. The inside of the house was as ostentatious as the outside, filled with expensive furniture and gaudy decorations. Thorpe led them to a sitting room and gestured to a sofa. "Please sit." "We will stand," Owen said. "This will not take long." Thorpe poured himself a brandy from a crystal decanter, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Very well. You wanted to talk, so talk." Penelope drew a breath. "Marcus, I am sorry if I hurt your pride by breaking our engagement. But I am married now, married to a man I love, and I am asking you to accept that and move on. Stop this campaign of harassment against my husband. Stop trying to destroy his livelihood. Let us live in peace." Thorpe took a slow sip of his brandy. "And why should I do that?" "You humiliated me, Penelope. You made me look like a fool in front of the entire town. You broke a sacred promise, violated the trust I placed in you." "There was no trust between us," Penelope said. "There was only your possessiveness and my fear. You hurt me, Marcus. You scared me so badly that I was willing to die in a blizzard rather than marry you. Does that not tell you something about what our marriage would have been?" "It tells me that you are weak," Thorpe said, and his cultured mask slipped, showing the ugliness beneath. "It tells me that you do not understand loyalty or duty or respect. I offered you everything, and you threw it away for a cowboy who lives in a shack and survives on scraps." Owen felt his temper rising, but Penelope squeezed his hand, warning him to stay calm. I chose love over wealth, Penelope said. I chose freedom over fear, and I do not regret that choice for a moment. Please, Marcus, let this go. Find someone else, someone who can give you what you are looking for, but leave us alone. Thorpe set down his glass with a sharp click. No. The single word hung in the air like a death sentence. I will not let this go, Thorpe continued, his voice rising. You are mine, Penelope. You promised yourself to me, and I do not accept your betrayal. I will keep coming, keep making your lives hell until you understand that you cannot defy me without consequences. Then you leave us no choice, Owen said quietly. I did not want this fight, Thorpe, but if you insist on having it, I will not back down. You want to destroy my ranch. I will rebuild it. You want to ruin my reputation. I will earn it back. You want to hurt me. I have survived worse than you. But if you touch my wife, if you so much as breathe wrong in her direction, I will end you. That is not a threat. That is a promise. Thorpe laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You think you can threaten me? I own half this town. The sheriff is in my pocket, the mayor owes me money, and I have men who will do whatever I pay them to do. You are one cowboy with delusions of heroism. You cannot win this fight. Maybe not, Owen said, but I will fight it anyway. Thorpe's face went purple with rage. Get out of my house, both of you. And when you are begging in the streets, when Hartford has lost everything and you are homeless and desperate, remember that I gave you a chance to come back. They left without another word, walking back down the path with as much dignity as they could muster. Neither of them spoke until they were mounted and riding out of town. That went well, Penelope said with bitter humor. At least we tried, Owen replied. And now we know exactly where we stand. We are at war. But the war they expected did not come. Days passed, then weeks, and there were no more attacks on the ranch. The fences remained intact, the cattle undisturbed. It was unnerving in its own way, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then in late April, Sheriff Brennan rode out to the ranch with news that changed everything. Marcus Thorpe is dead, he announced without preamble. Owen and Penelope, who had been working in the garden, stared at him in shock. What? Penelope whispered. Found him this morning in his study. Bullet to the head. Looks like suicide, but we are investigating. Brennan looked at Owen meaningfully. Given your history with the man, I need to ask where you were last night. Here, Owen said immediately. Both of us were here all night. We had dinner, we read for a while, we went to bed. We did not leave the ranch. Can anyone corroborate that? Just each other, Penelope said. But we are telling the truth, Sheriff. We had no reason to kill Marcus. He had been leaving us alone for weeks. Brennan nodded slowly. I believe you. But there are going to be questions, you understand. A man like Thorpe does not kill himself without a reason, and you two had the biggest grudge against him. What about his hired men? Owen asked. The ones who were cutting my fences and stealing my cattle. Gone, Brennan said. Cleared out the same night Thorpe died, took what they could carry and vanished. Makes me think they know more about this than they are letting on. The investigation continued for weeks, with Owen and Penelope under a cloud of suspicion. But without evidence, and with several witnesses placing them at home the night of Thorpe's death, the sheriff eventually ruled it a suicide. The common theory was that Thorpe's business had been failing, that he was drowning in debts he had hidden behind a facade of wealth, and that he had chosen to end his life rather than face public humiliation. Owen was not sure he believed the suicide theory, but he was not about to argue with it either. Whatever had happened to Marcus Thorpe, it had nothing to do with him or Penelope, and the man's death meant they were finally free to live their lives in peace. Summer came to the California mountains, transforming the landscape from white to gold and green. The ranch thrived under Owen and Penelope's joint efforts, with the cattle healthy and the fences strong. Penelope took over the garden and the chickens, and she also began tutoring the children of neighboring ranchers, fulfilling her dream of teaching in whatever way she could. Their love deepened with each passing day, growing from the desperate passion of new lovers into something more solid and enduring. They learned how to fight fairly and forgive quickly, how to support each other's dreams while building shared ones. They learned the rhythms of partnership, the give and take of two people committed to making a life together. In the fall, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. Owen received the news with a joy so profound, it frightened him a little. He had never imagined himself as a father, but now he could not imagine anything he wanted more. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, as if repetition would make the reality sink in. Penelope laughed at him, her hand on her still flat stomach. "Yes, we are. In about 7 months, if my calculations are correct. Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Owen said, pulling her into his arms. Terrified, excited, overwhelmed, all of those things, but mostly happy, so incredibly happy. The pregnancy was not easy. Penelope suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Owen fretted over her like a mother hen, much to her amusement. But as winter returned and her belly grew round, she bloomed with health, her face glowing, her laughter coming easily. They prepared the bedroom for the baby, building a cradle from pine wood that Owen sanded until it was smooth as silk. Penelope sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her hands flying over the fabric with practiced skill. They argued good-naturedly about names, with Owen favoring traditional names and Penelope wanting something more unusual. The baby came in late March of 1873, arriving on a night when spring rain drummed against the roof and thunder rolled through the mountains. Owen rode through the storm to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had delivered half the babies in Placerville and had a reputation for skill and calm competence. The labor was long and difficult, and Owen spent most of it pacing outside the bedroom door, listening to Penelope's cries with a helplessness that nearly drove him mad. Mrs. Chen emerged periodically to give him updates and to tell him firmly that everything was progressing normally, but Owen could not relax until he heard the sharp, angry cry of a newborn baby. Mrs. Chen opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Hartford, a healthy boy with good lungs. Come meet him." Owen entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Penelope was propped up in bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked up at Owen with tears streaming down her face. "Owen, look at our son." Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed and peered at the tiny red face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had dark hair like Penelope, and what looked like it might become Owen's nose. His eyes were squeezed shut, and he was making small snuffling sounds. "He is perfect," Owen whispered, touching one miniature fist with a gentle finger. The baby's hand opened and closed around Owen's finger, gripping with surprising strength. "Hello, son. Welcome to the world. I was thinking we could name him Thomas," Penelope said softly, "after your father." "Thomas Hartford." Owen felt his throat tighten. "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. You told me your father was a good man, an honest man. I want our son to have that legacy." "Thomas Hartford," Owen repeated, testing the sound of it. "Tom, it is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned down and kissed Penelope gently. "Thank you for him, for everything, for choosing to stay alive that day in the snow, for choosing me, for making me happier than I ever thought possible." Penelope smiled through her tears. "Thank you for pulling me out of that snow, for telling me I mattered when I had forgotten how to believe that, for loving me." They sat together, the three of them, while outside the storm raged and inside the fire crackled and baby Thomas slept, oblivious to how much love surrounded him. The years that followed were good ones, full of the hard work and simple pleasures that make up a life well lived. The ranch prospered, growing from a modest operation to one of the more successful cattle ranches in the region. Owen's reputation recovered from the scandal of his marriage to Penelope, helped in large part by their obvious devotion to each other and their contributions to the community. Penelope officially opened a school on the ranch, teaching not just neighboring children, but also any adult who wanted to learn to read. She had a gift for education, a patience and enthusiasm that made even the most reluctant student eager to learn. Owen often came in from work to find the main room of their house full of students, and it made his heart swell with pride. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic boy with his mother's quick mind and his father's love of the outdoors. Owen taught him to ride almost before he could walk, and Penelope taught him his letters and numbers while he sat on her lap. They were strict parents but loving ones, determined to give their son the security and affection that both of them had lacked at various points in their own childhoods. When Thomas was 3, Penelope gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, a placid, happy baby who seemed content to watch the world with wide, observant eyes. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was trouble from the moment he learned to crawl. The house was full of noise and laughter and the chaos of children, and sometimes Owen would stop in the middle of his work, struck by the sheer improbability of it all. That a man who had been alone in the world could end up here, surrounded by family and love, building something that would outlast him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen and Penelope took a rare evening to themselves, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen, and riding up to the ridge where Owen had first brought Penelope the summer after they married. They sat together on the rocks, watching the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and purple. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Marrying me. This life is not easy." Penelope looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Regret it? Owen, these have been the happiest years of my life. I wake up every morning grateful that I survived that blizzard, grateful that you found me, grateful for every moment we have together." "I just sometimes think about what you gave up," Owen said. "You could have gone to Sacramento, started over fresh where no one knew about Marcus or the scandal. You could have become a real teacher in a real school, had a life that was not so hard." Penelope took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. I have exactly the life I want. Yes, it is hard sometimes. Raising 3 children on a ranch is hard. Teaching school is hard. Building something real and lasting is hard, but it is also joyful and meaningful and mine, ours. I would not trade a single moment of it for an easier path." Owen kissed her, still amazed after all these years by the fact that she was his, that she had chosen him. "I love you. More now than even in the beginning." "I love you too," Penelope said, resting her forehead against his. "Thank you for saving me, Owen Hartford, for pulling me out of that snow and telling me I mattered. You changed my life that day." "You changed mine right back," Owen replied. "The moment I saw you, I knew nothing would ever be the same." They sat on the ridge until the stars came out, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate sorrows. Below them, the ranch spread out in the gathering darkness, home to their family, their dreams, their future. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The children grew and thrived. Thomas proved to have his father's gift with horses and his mother's head for business, and by the time he was 16, he was already managing much of the ranch's day-to-day operations. Elizabeth discovered a passion for art, spending hours sketching the mountains and wildlife around the ranch. James remained trouble, but the kind of trouble that came from boundless energy and curiosity rather than any malicious intent. Owen and Penelope grew older together, their hair showing silver, their faces gaining lines that spoke of laughter and hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by the years into something unbreakable. On cold winter nights, when the snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Owen would sometimes think back to that day in 1871, when he had ridden out into the blizzard following an instinct he could not name. He would remember pulling Penelope from the snow, remember the way her eyes had opened and she had asked why he would save her. "Because you matter," he had told her, and he had meant it with his whole heart. What he had not known then was how much she would come to matter, how completely she would transform his life. He had thought he was saving her that day, but the truth was more complicated than that. They had saved each other, two lost souls finding home in each other's arms. When Owen was 52 and Penelope 50, they welcomed their first grandchild, Thomas's daughter Sarah. Holding that tiny baby in his arms, seeing the continuation of the family he and Penelope had built, Owen felt a sense of completion that was almost overwhelming. "We did it," he told Penelope that night as they lay in bed. "We built something real, something that will last." "We did," Penelope agreed, her hand finding his in the darkness. "And it all started with you being brave enough to ride out into a blizzard and stubborn enough to refuse to let me give up. And you being strong enough to survive and brave enough to trust me," Owen countered. "We make a good team, Penelope Hartford." "The best," she agreed, and he could hear the smile in her voice. More grandchildren followed over the years. Elizabeth married a school teacher from Sacramento and gave them 2 grandsons. James eventually settled down with a rancher's daughter and added 3 more grandchildren to the family. The house that had once seemed so large when it was just Owen alone became the gathering place for a sprawling, noisy, loving family. On their 25th anniversary, their children and grandchildren organized a party at the ranch. The whole community came, filling the yard with music and laughter and food. Owen and Penelope stood together on the porch, watching the celebration, and Owen marveled at how much his life had changed. "You remember what you told me once?" Penelope asked, leaning against his shoulder. "That first winter when we were falling in love, you said that the land made you feel like you were part of something larger than yourself." "I remember," Owen said. "I understand that now," Penelope continued. "This family, this community we have helped build, this life we have created together. It is so much larger than either of us alone, and I am grateful every day to be part of it, to be part of us." Owen wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "You are the best part of me, Penelope. Always have been, always will be." They stood together on the porch as the sun set and the party continued. 2 people who had found each other in the midst of a blizzard and built a lifetime of love from that single moment of connection. Owen Hartford lived to the age of 73, dying peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night in 1920. He was surrounded by family, his hand held by Penelope, who had been by his side for nearly 50 years. His last words were, "I love you. Thank you for staying." Penelope Hartford lived for 5 more years, spending her final days surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, telling stories about the early days of the ranch and the remarkable man who had saved her life, and then spent the rest of his life loving her. She died at the age of 77, peacefully in the same bed she had shared with Owen, and her last words were, "I am coming home, my love. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on the ridge overlooking the ranch, the place where they had first sat together as a married couple and dreamed about their future. Their gravestone was simple, carved from local granite, and it bore both their names and a single line beneath. "Because you matter," the ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, each new generation adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that Owen and Penelope had built. The tale of how they met, of the cowboy who pulled a dying woman from the snow and told her she mattered, became family legend, told and retold to wide-eyed children who could barely imagine a time when their great-great-grandparents were young. But for those who had known them, for those who had witnessed the deep and abiding love between Owen and Penelope Hartford, the story needed no embellishment. It was epic enough on its own, a testament to the truth that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, and that the greatest love stories begin with a single act of compassion, a moment of connection between two souls who were meant to find each other. In the end, Owen had been right that day in the blizzard. Penelope mattered. She mattered to him, to their children, to their community, to everyone whose life she touched with her kindness and intelligence and strength. But he had mattered too, this cowboy with a generous heart and steady hands, who had looked at a stranger dying in the snow and seen someone worth saving. And together, they had built a life that proved, beyond any doubt, that both of them mattered more than either of them had dared to believe on that cold day in 1871 when their paths first crossed. Years after they were both gone, the ranch still stood, a testament to their love and determination. The house they had built together, that had sheltered their children and grandchildren, remained the heart of the property. The ridge where they were buried became a place of peace and reflection, where family members would come to sit and think and remember. On quiet winter nights, when snow fell softly on the California mountains, some said you could still feel their presence there. Two spirits who had found each other against all odds and loved each other through all challenges. Whether that was true or just wishful thinking, no one could say for certain. But what was undeniably true was the legacy they left behind, not just in the land and the ranch and the family that continued to thrive, but in the lesson they taught by simply living their lives. That every person matters, that compassion and courage can change the course of a life. That love, real love, is built not in grand gestures but in daily choices to show up, to be present, to care for each other through all seasons. That a man riding out into a blizzard can find his purpose. That a woman buried in snow can find her second chance. That two broken people can heal each other and build something beautiful from their shared wounds. The story of Owen and Penelope Hartford was, in the end, a simple one. They were two people who found each other when they both needed saving, and they spent the rest of their lives being grateful for that moment of grace. They were not perfect people. They made mistakes and had doubts and faced challenges that sometimes seemed insurmountable. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. In a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, especially in the rough days of the Old West, their love was a beacon of hope. It proved that goodness existed, that compassion mattered, that choosing to save a stranger could lead to a lifetime of joy. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that we are all capable of being heroes in our own small ways, and that sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is simply tell another person that they matter. As the decades passed, and the Old West faded into history, becoming the stuff of legend and nostalgia, the story of Owen and Penelope remained. It was preserved in family records, in letters they had written, in the memories passed down through generations. It was a real story, not a myth or a fairy tale, but a true account of two real people who had lived and loved and left their mark on the world. And somewhere in the vast mystery beyond life, Perhaps they were together still. Owen and Penelope Hartford, still hand in hand, still choosing each other, still proving that true love is not just a beginning but a promise kept day after day, year after year, for all of eternity. Because in the end, love is not about the dramatic rescue or the passionate declaration. Love is about showing up every day and proving through actions more than words that the other person matters. That is what Owen and Penelope did for each other, from that first moment in the snow until their final breaths. They showed up. They cared. They chose each other, again and again, through every challenge and every joy. And in doing so, they created something that mattered far beyond themselves, a legacy of love that would echo through generations, reminding everyone who heard their story that we all matter, we all have value, and we all deserve someone who will ride into the blizzard to save us.